question, what if that power also supplies a civilian hospital? Now the principles of humanity might be violated, because even though you have a purpose to attack, a SCADA system, it may have the collateral effect of unnecessarily affecting a civilian hospital. Last but not least, proportionality. This is basically I call it a calculus. And a good way to remember this is that the ends must justify the means. And for the business types out there, this is essentially a return on investment analysis. Basically, what you're doing must be worth it. The ends must justify the means. So that's post hostilities. So now, I'll take a few minutes to hop on my soapbox. We have discussed computer network operations and the actors involved. We have looked at laws related to cyber warfare, both pre and post hostilities, and I will now provide commentary on popular issues that I believe are intensifying the cyber warfare debate. So first, we have the use of force debate. A popular issue, as I was discussing it before, is about the use of force. When is a cyber act considered a use of force? One of the most popular answers to that question was proposed by Michael Smith. He's very, very famous. I read anything I can get my hands on that he wrote, I read. He basically have proposed a multi-factor test to determine when a cyber act constitutes a use of force. Smith, he recommends a consequence-based analysis to determine whether an act constitutes a use of force using the following factors. First, severity. He looks at immediacy, directness, invasiveness, measurability, the presumptive legitimacy, and responsibility. But so my response to that is, as a reminder, and what I was saying earlier, it may not even be that important, because all uses of force are presumed to be wrongful unless it was, allowed by the UN Security Council or done under self-defense. So then the question is, should the UN Security Council just be required to adopt one standard multi-factor test? Well, my response to that is that a multi-factor test may unnecessarily limit the broad authority that the UN Council has. I think that with cyber acts, it's very important that the UN Security Council maintain their broad authority. Now, it is one way that a lot of courts, when it comes, when you're making a rule, multi-factor tests are very commonplace in the law. Most of the time when courts want to maintain a broad authority, they may have a list of multi-factors, but that last factor may allow for the court to maintain its broad authority. So, for example, you may have a statute or a law with factor 1, factor 2, factor 3, all the way down to the last factor. And then that last factor will then say it'll be very broad. After all those factors and any other factor that the court deems necessary. So I would like to propose and add to the Smith test that in addition to his numbered factors, it be another factor added that says, and any other factor that the UN Security Council deems necessary, or something to that effect. That way the UN Security Council maintains their broad authority, but then still has a standard. But that's sort of the only way I agree with a multi-factor test. So then, in light of the general prohibition against uses of force, I want to propose the following rule. A nation conducting any CNA prior to hostilities is legally doing so only in the case of reasonable self-defense. If self-defense is not involved, then the nation actor is conducting CNA with the risk of being sanctioned or punished by the UN Security Council. That's the rule I propose. I think that'll be a great standard. Now, does the UN Security Council need to do more to monitor cyber acts? Yes. But I don't think it implies that the current rules of war are inadequate for addressing cyber warfare. So secondly, I've been seeing an analogy floating around called the cyber arms race, or cyber gating, or the cyber cold war, that type thing. I think that is sort of an exaggeration. So basically, we're comparing cyber weapons to nuclear weapons. I think that may be an unfair comparison. Furthermore, I believe that may give a false sense of urgency of the necessity of creating a cyber treaty. So, when you hear cyber, Cold War, when you hear that, you automatically think about, you know, the dangers of nuclear power, and now all of a sudden you think it's necessary to create a international treaty for cyber warfare. And I think that that's a danger of doing that. So then similar to that though, it's important to know that the cyber threat is real. I don't know if you guys heard of it, but recently there was a debate where, you know, Bruce Snyder came out and he said something that was pretty revolutionary. He believed that, you know, the cyber threat has been grossly exaggerated. Now, Bruce, he has an excellent blog called Threat Chaos. I go to it every day. Bruce is another person that I read. Anything that he writes, I try to read. Bruce Snyder. I'm sorry, Sneer. Sorry. So anything Bruce writes, I try to read. I kind of like track him and stalk him because he's genius. And he's on this LinkedIn group called the Cyber Warfare Forum Initiative that I'm a member of. And I try to like look at stuff he's writing and stuff. But he believes, and he strongly believes that the cyber threat has been grossly exaggerated. So my view is that, you know, it's very, very, very hard to exaggerate cyber warfare. So, but at the same time, he has a point. So I propose this rule. I have what I call the fire marshal Bill test. So how did I come up with this test? Basically, I think that cyber is the new fire. So fire safety, fire awareness is so important that it's ingrained everywhere. If you look over there, there's an exit sign, you know, for fire safety. If you were to see a commercial on TV that said, you know, don't forget to change your batteries to your smoke detector, you wouldn't say, hey, what the hell? You know, why are they saying, why are they reminding me that? They're exaggerating the danger of fire. You would think, man, I do need to change my batteries. I believe that cyber needs to become the new fire. We need to really, really be conscious of the threats of cyber, and we need to become cyber conscious. So if someone was to come up to you and say something about fire, you wouldn't accuse that person of grossly exaggerating, and I don't think that we should accuse people of grossly exaggerating cyber threats. So again, I propose the fire marshal Bill test. How do you know when someone is exaggerating a cyber threat? How do you know that? Well, it takes real like gross exaggeration, and let me show it to you. I don't know if anybody remember Fire Marshal Bill from In Living Color.
Fighting broke out overnight between rival factions along the Israeli.
Honey! How's that roast coming along?
It's almost ready, dear.
Gee, Dad, that sounds close.
Fire Marshal Bill is the only guy that can exaggerate the fire
Dad,
threat.
it stopped right in front of the house.
What's
So you got to find a similar guy to show
let's all just
the
calm down. I'll take care
cyber
of
threat
this.
being exaggerated.
Nice to meet you, folks. Fire Marshal Bill here.
Won't you come in?
Don't mind if I don't.
Wow, a real fireman.
That's right, Princess. Say, you sure have a beautiful family here.
Why, thank you, Fire Marshal Bill. Now, how can we help you?
Well, it's National Fire Safety Week. I've been going door to door looking for fire hazards. Mind if I give your place a little inspection? It's free.
Please do.
Son, does your father always smoke a pipe?
Yes, sir.
Pipes, cigarettes, #1 cause of domestic fires. Let me show you something.
Certainly.
Now, say one night you're drifting off to sleep on the couch and the pipe falls out of your hand like that. Now you start dreaming that you're having a little barbecue, you pull out a can of lighter fluid. Boom! Got that? Oh, yeah.
Hey, Fire Marshal Bill, your finger's on fire.
It's getting better, nothing. I caught fire so many times I can't even feel it anymore. The trick is not to panic. Fire is your friend. Uh-oh. Look what I found. Down at the station, we like to call this an octopus. Let me show you something. Pulleys up, it becomes an exposed electrical outlet. let's just say it's after dinner, you've got a fork in your hand, somebody says, hey, I've got no these. Where?
Fire Marshal Bill, are you okay?
Are you joking? I've been hit by lightning 19 times.
That's horrible.
Not really. I'm starting to enjoy it. Okay, everybody. Out to the kitchen.
Okay, what an idiot, right? So, hold on, let me get my slide back. So I show that example, just to say this. To me, it is very, very hard to exaggerate the threat of cyber. It's very hard to exaggerate that. I think that Bruce may have had that wrong. Again, I believe that cyber is the new fire. We gotta take it serious. So but it is a time that you need to throw the flag, right? When it is being grossly exaggerated. So when you want to throw that flag, to say someone is grossly exaggerating the cyber threat, think about that Dundee's fire marshal bill test. If that person is not, doing, exaggerating stuff and being an idiot like fire marshal bill, don't throw the flag. The cyber threat is real. So now I will get to the meat and potatoes of my study. I'll come off my soapbox, get to the meat and potatoes of it. I'll now give 5 arguments why I believe creating a distinct body or international treaty for cyber warfare. I'll now give 5 arguments why I believe we should not create a distinct body or international law or international treaty for cyber warfare. First, I've already shown that the current rules of war can address it. So that's reason number 1. The current rules already can address the rules of cyber warfare. Reason number 2. Fields of law are seldom demarcated by technology. I want to point to the Sommer argument that was proffered by Joseph Sommer. Basically, he argued against the creation of a distinct body of cyber law. He asserted that cyber law is not a body of law in and of itself, as technologies generally do not define bodies of law. Also, he thought that it was dangerous to consider cyber law as its own body of law, and that to do so would lead to the development of bad law. Sommer highlighted the fact that there was never a law of the steam engine, despite its role in technology. So similarly, I kind of took that Sommer argument and looked at it from a warfare standpoint and built on it. Basically, Sommer was like, it was if you look at old stuff that revolutionized society, like the car, the steam engine, the train, it was no such thing as train law. So why should we now all of a sudden come out with cyber law? He thought that it was dangerous. I think that that's very relevant to whether or not it should be an international law for cyber warfare. Now, if you look at that list right there, I have some very, very interesting treaties listed. Check that one out. The law of equestrian warfare, horse law. At some point during warfare, it was pretty revolutionary to use horses. It was pretty revolutionary to do that. So looking at the Sommer argument, believe it or not, some of those are real and some of those are actually false. But before I talk about which ones were false, I want to point to that mask right there. It's from my favorite movie, 300. Those were the immortals in one of the legendary battles in 300. If you think about it, back then, that mask was a serious technology. That was something that assisted warfare. It probably fell under the domain of psychological operations, but that was pretty serious. So, imagine it being like the year BC or whenever 300 was supposed to have taken place, and you show up to fight, you and Leonidas and the rest of the 300. You got to say his name like that, Leonidas. Imagine you show up and all of a sudden you see that that mask. That's very intimidating. That's a psychological effect. So technically, they could have came out with a law that basically bans the use of or bans the imitation of paranormal activity. That's similar to what we're trying to do now. If we come out with a law about cyber warfare, that's no different than back in the days of Leonidas. That's no different from coming out with a law trying to regulate the use of masks or intimidating paranormal activity. What about when bows and arrows and spears and shields first started to be used? I would imagine that it was a day and time where we fought war with just fists, right? But when someone came out with the spear or the bow and arrow, that was revolutionary. So, looking back on it, should there have been an international treaty on bows and arrows and shields? Now, I'll admit, you know, the first 1, 2, 3, the first 5 of those, actually the first